Okay, so the next thing that we can do when we are utilizing JApplets is we can actually capture mouse events. So we can press a mouse button, we can release a mouse button, we can click and drag, we can move our mouse around, and so we can capture all of that information. So if we look over here on page 957, it talks about mouse pressed event. So the mouse pressed event, we got a mouse click event, a mouse released event, a mouse entered event, a mouse exit event. So mouse pressed means we are pressing a mouse button. When I release it, that's basically considered a click. So there's a press and a click. Mouse, mouse pressed is when we're holding the mouse button down. Clicked is when we basically click and release it without moving the mouse. When we basically click and drag a mouse and then release it, that's called the mouse release. So there's a difference between click and release. Click means we didn't move the mouse, release means we did move the mouse and when we let go. So again, so I can have a starting point and an ending point. I can capture those two things with the mouse. And then I've got mouse entered, so I can actually have a box. When my mouse enters in that box, we've now entered it. And when I move outside of that box, I've now basically exited. So a lot of different mouse events that we can do. We also have, so these items are captured by the mouse listener. Okay, so the mouse press, clicked, released, entered, and exit. Those are captured by the mouse listener. We also have a mouse motion listener, and those we have a mouse drag and a mouse move. So those are two separate listeners that are going on. So let's just take a look at the code. So take a look at the mouse events. So we take a look at the mouse events. So it's a JApplet. We've got our JText field. It is an array this time because we're going to have a bunch of different text boxes, and we have a string array as well. So again, we're going to have some text boxes that kind of go along with our strings here. So it looks like we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different boxes we're going to be utilizing. So here's my init. I set the layout. I have a mouse states, which equals, so again, that is the text boxes. It's called mouse states, and we instantiate it as a new text box. And then I basically have my for loop here. So it's just like the previous one, where I go ahead and lay those text boxes out on the screen, and I put labels on them as well with that string text box, and then I go ahead and add those to the JApplet. And then I have a mouse listener, which is my mouse listener, and I have a mouse motion listener, and I basically instantiate that as a mouse motion listener. Then we have our clear text fields. So this is a method that's called, and in there what we do is we go through all of the different text boxes and change the background color to gray. You'll see why we do that here in a second. So here's my mouse listener, and when I press the mouse, it's going to do this. So it's got methods inside of each. Again, each one of these listeners is a class. So very first thing I do is I clear the fields. Now we can see we make sure all the backgrounds are gray. Then if the mouse states, we set the background color to yellow, meaning if the text box that is basically happening there, the event, then we are going to change it to yellow. That's the mouse pressed event. If I have a mouse click event, I go ahead and change the text box 1, which is the second checkbox, to yellow. Mouse release, I change that box to yellow. Mouse entered, I change that one to yellow. If it's a mouse exited, I change that one to yellow. Then within my mouse listener, I have my mouse dragged, meaning if I hold down my mouse button and drag around, it will basically set the background color of that text box to yellow. Then we have a mouse move. Now these happen all the time. Anytime we move a mouse, it's going to happen. And what it does is it doesn't change the color. It just puts in the text box the letter X, space, and then it gets the get X. So the X and Y coordinates. So it gets the X coordinate, which is probably the column. And then the next text box shows the Y coordinate, and it grabs the row. So no matter where we move our mouse, those two are always being displayed because that listener is always being executed. So if I run this, there it is. So when I move in my mouse into here, I've just entered. Notice the X and Y coordinates. Wherever I move my mouse, those are, so again, it looks as though it's just happening, but each time it changes, I move the mouse, it actually executed that mouse listener event. And then when I go into I go outside, I just exited that screen, I come back in. If I click, I just clicked. If I press and move around, now I'm dragging. Okay, when I release, a release event just happened. So a lot of different things are going on here. So I can click and drag. I can press. When I let go, it's a click. When I drag and let go, it's a release. Enter and exit, so on and so forth. So you see a lot of different events we can do there. So let's tie those now to some different features. So if we go into the draw boxes. If I go into draw boxes, let's take a look at draw boxes. So here I've created a current Y, current X. I've got a width and a height, and again, those are the instance variables for this particular class. And again, this is a JApplet class. Here's my init. I add the mouse listener, I add mouse motion listener, so I have those two listeners ready to go. Here's my paint, and then again, I inherit all of the paint different methods, and then I do a draw rectangle at this current X, that current Y, the width and the height. Okay. What is the current Y? What is the current width? Well, here's the mouse listener. The mouse listener, well, let's move on down here to the mouse motion listener. So the mouse motion listener, wherever my mouse is, it knows where that current X and current Y is. So what it does, so whenever I press the button, it grabs the current X and the current Y, or I should say it gets the e.getX and Y, puts those in those two numbers. So now we've got the current X and current Y. And then when I drag, when I end up dragging, so when I do a mouse drag, meaning wherever it ends up, I'm going to go ahead and get the width and the height, which is the e.getX, and we subtract the current Y. That will give us the width and the height. And we also do that with the X or Y coordinate as well. Now notice we went ahead and put all of the different methods in there. So here I have the mouse clicked, mouse released, mouse entered, and I don't have any data in them. So they're actually being called, but they're not. There's nothing in there to basically do. So it just basically goes in and out. We might do that just in case we want to leave that an option to add something later. So I run the draw boxes. What it allows me to do is I can actually click and draw a rectangle. I click again, draw a rectangle. Okay. So pretty cool stuff. So it basically it's drawing it as I move the mouse. Okay. So when I click and drag out, it looks as though I'm doing one item that keeps getting executed, repainting as we basically draw that box around. Now, the next one is the draw boxes 2, and it's identical to the previous one, but we've removed all the methods we're not using. So we're just trying to show that we don't have to have those. And again, if I run the draw boxes 2, we get the same exact results. Okay, so we don't have to have those methods, but they're just trying to show you that you can leave those in there as kind of a placeholder if you ever do want to use them. But if you do not want to basically have all that code sitting around, you can actually remove them as well. So it's not necessary to leave those in there. Okay, so mouse events, pretty cool. We can actually now tie those into different things. We can actually use it for the drawing. We could do an arc. We could do all that sort of thing. Now, the next thing we have is a timer event. Now, a timer event is something really kind of cool because it's just like a timer. We can start it and it starts running. Now, with a timer, it's in thousandths of a second. So if I want to do 4 seconds, I have to make sure that I set the increments to 1,000. So we do 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, and that's 4 seconds. So if we look here, my timer class, I do have an action listener. I have a get delay, which is an integer. I have is running, set delay, start, and a stop. So I can start the timer and stop the timer. So here's what we want to do. We're going to look at this bouncing ball. So with the bouncing ball, it's a J applet. I have an X. I'm going to initialize it to 109. And these are all finals, these first three are finals, and I have a width and a height of 40 and 40. I have a time delay of 30. I have an init move, again this is a final as well, so it's a constant, of 20, and a minimum Y, a maximum Y of 50 and 400, and then I have an int Y equals 400, so that's a starting point, and here's my Boolean going up is true, and then I have my timer, so I have a timer class. It's not instantiated yet. So within my init, I instantiate my timer, and I have my time delay and my new timer listener. So there's my listener that basically is going to call that listener class. My time delay is set at 30. Okay, that's 31 thousandths of a second. Here's my paint. Again, I inherit all the paint methods. I set the color to red. I do my fill oval, so I create a fill oval at X and Y. Currently that's at 50 and 400, and at this width and height. There's my width and my height of 40 and 40. So basically we're going to have a red ball at that position, and it's got a width and height of 40. And it's solid. So then here's my timer listener. And it says, if going up, meaning going up is true right now. If that's true, we're going to basically, if the Y is greater than the minimum Y. So right now Y is 50 and the minimum Y is, Y is 400 and the minimum Y is 50. So if it is greater than the minimum Y, and it is, I'm going to say Y X minus equal move. So I'm going to subtract the move, which is 20. So I'm going to basically move that circle down a little bit. If Y is greater than the minimum Y, I'm going to change going up to false, meaning we're no longer going up, we're going down, because once I get to a certain height on that screen, I need to stop, change it, and we're going to go backwards, which we're then going to add to the move. We're going to add. So what we're doing is we keep repainting and moving that circle down. We get to the bottom of that screen. We now basically have been we have our maximum Y, then we're going to turn around and say, now we're going up, we're going to subtract, add, subtract. We keep doing that back and forth. And again, since a timer is 31 thousandths of a second, watch what happens when we run this guy. I click the bouncing ball, I run it, it looks like there's a ball that's bouncing back and forth, when in a sense we keep repainting that, and we're again adding, making it go up, and once we hit that max number, then we go ahead and change that Boolean switch to false, and we make it basically go down until we hit the max. Then we basically keep going, so that loop keeps going back and forth. So it's basically an endless loop, and it basically looks like that thing's going back and forth, but really all it's doing is it's repainting a red circle on the screen. Pretty slick, pretty cool. Okay, so let's call it quits there, and we're going to come back with the last thing called audio, and basically, which is really cool stuff, and we'll see you in a little bit.